computer. Yes. Okay. So, Rachel Valentine, 2 a.m. And I get to share a little bit tonight with my friend Celeste. Hi, Celeste. And we are going to be piggybacking what we started last week. So, hey, Jenna. So, if you, I think all of you were with us, but if you're watching on the replay and you missed out on last week, just kind of scroll a little bit further down the Live Love team feed in our last Monday meetup. But we laid a framework of something that has to do with not just mindset, it has to do with our heart set. And where we're going to go tonight is one, we're really going to be doing a deep dive into this history, this story that we have created about ourselves and why that is really important to understand our story and how in the world that has anything to do. In fact, it has probably everything to do with how we show up and do hard, scary, anxiety-producing, uncomfortable things in our everyday lives. So it definitely pertains to plexus. And what I believe is that there really isn't anything like network marketing to really push on some of those old narratives. So in a little bit, Celeste is going to unpack that for us. But I want to just start us off one with, I don't know if any of you have been joining in the Monday motivation calls that Plexus puts out. They are really golden. Most Mondays, I don't get to hear them, so I usually hear them later on in the week. But one thing that I love is Genevieve, who is our Director of Global Sales and Education for all of the ambassadors. She lays out every Motivation Monday by saying, I want you to think for yourself, what is one intention that you are going to have from this call? Meaning, what is one thing that you are hoping to glean? What is it? Is it you're hoping to gain confidence? Is it you're hoping to have a strategy that you can leave this call with? Is it that you're looking for a sense of community? Is it looking for a sense of just a general like push in the butt, right? So whatever it is, I want for you to take a minute and I want you just to get your heart and your head connected and ask yourself, you know, if you have 45 to 50 minutes on this call, time is precious. It's your most precious commodity that you have. You'll never get it back. And I hope I don't scare you off the call by saying that. But what are you thinking that you are going to look for to make this totally worth your time and energy? Because the truth of it is if you set your heart and your mind to it, chances are much more likely that you will actually see it and come away with it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm going to start us off. I honestly ran across a scripture verse today, and it was incredibly moving and powerful. And so I thought, gosh, there's really no better way than to have us ponder it a little bit together as we go into what I consider to be really sacred ground. Sacred ground is where we show up with our hurts. We show up with the parts of ourselves that I laid out last time that either tell us that we're not enough or that tell us that we're too much, right? The things that get in our way that are honestly more about shame than anything else. They are the things that rob us of what is to come. They are the things that say we're not important, right? That we're not worthy. So this word comes from Jeremiah 1. It's Jeremiah 1 verses 5 through 12. And I love it from the Message version, so that's the version I'm going to read. But I want you just to take a moment and just hear it, okay? This is God speaking to the prophet Jeremiah. He says, "Before I shaped you in the womb, I knew all about you. Before you saw the light of day, I had holy plans for you. A prophet to the nations. That's what I had in mind for you." But I said, "Hold it, Master God. Look at me. I don't know anything. I'm only a boy." And God told me, "Don't say I'm only a boy. I'll tell you where to go, and you'll go there. I'll tell you what to say, and you'll say it. Don't be afraid of a soul. I'll be right there looking after you." God's decree. God reached out, touched my mouth, and said, "Look, I've just put my words in your mouth. Hand delivered. See what I've done? I've given you a job to do. Among nations and governments, a red letter day. Your job is to pull up and tear down, take apart and demolish, and then start over, building and planting." God's message came to me. "What do you see, Jeremiah?" I said, "A walking stick, that's all." And God said, "Good eyes. I'm sticking with you. I'll make every word I give you come true." I love this. I love this for so many reasons. I love it because it reminds us of things that are really, really important as we dig in to the things from the past that are hard and painful, that have been stored, not only in our mind, not only in our hearts, but stored within our bodies, our physicality of ourselves. I love that it says, "Before you were even born, I shaped you. I knew you. I chose you. I called you. I had plans for you. Plans to be a prophet to the nations." You guys, I had a little bit of fear as I wrote that word because I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to think like we've entered into some funky cult-like territory. We haven't. You guys know the definition of prophet. It's not scary. It's really not. The definition of prophet is an inspired teacher or a proclaimer of the rule of God, or no, the will of God. So an inspired teacher or a proclaimer of the will of God. And I think, you guys, sometimes they're known as seers or visionaries or dreamers, people who see a bigger, greater reality than what most people see. People who tend to see things beneath the surface or beyond, right, the typical eye. And I don't think you can share plexus with the soul. I mean, I really don't think you can share plexus with your soul if you are not a person that sees beyond what typical people see and see below what typical people see. Which means, did you guys know prophets in their time most often were not super embraced? Did you know that? Prophets in their time spoke a word that was often uncomfortable or hard or scary, that was meant to shake people, like shake people up, right? Like wake people up, right? And there were an awful lot of people in biblical times who didn't want to wake up. And I would say that there's a lot of people in our day and age who also, they're pretty good with comfortable. They're pretty good with easy and convenience, right? And that is not the message of what we have to offer. think about it. I had this really great perspective, and I'm gonna make sure can you just make sure? I think, Lisa, I'm gonna mute you. Okay, so maybe I'm not gonna mute you. Okay. So I've been doing this 21-day sugar fast with a group called the Revelation Wellness people. They're amazing. They're not plexus people, but they are incredibly faithful, looking for holistic living and living out their calling in everyday life. Usually through fitness and mission work, and they're just very inspiring. Well, in this group, they have like thousands of people from all over the world that are participating in this fast. And you guys, by day 3, people were losing their ever-loving minds. Like they were freaking out. They were anxious. Like, I don't think I can do this. Like, I mean, I have this problem, and here's all the reasons why this won't work for me. They were just asking like a million questions. They were freaking out about candida and die-off, and just like thousands of them were dropping like by day 3. And the 2 leaders were like, you guys, this is a 21-day sugar fast. This is not the end of the world. But people are so tied in, right? Food especially. And I would beg to bet like supplementations work so much with food, right? And being in rhythm with your body. And there's control issues upon control issues and freaky stuff connected to the body, like crazy. And I think what that gave me clarity was, no wonder this is hard. No wonder the work that we do is so hard, because it flies in the face of what is common, right? It flies in the face of what our culture says is so. It flies in the face of what traditional medicine often says is so. And it really, really begs people to become advocates and listen to their own bodies, right? To trust that there's an internal knowing sense, and to be okay sometimes with doing hard, because through the hard is where transformation happens. So we don't have to be afraid of hard. So, I love that part about the verse. I also love that there's a dialogue between Jeremiah, who says, I'm only a boy. Like, who am I? And isn't it also Moses who says, who am I? And God says, I will give you the words to say. How often do we all say that, like on a daily basis? But who am I? Who am I? That's really, I'm not enough. Who am I? Like, will people really care what I say? Does it even really matter? Who am I? But God says, you guys, I've given you a job to do. I've called you to it. I've equipped you for it. And that goes so much far beyond plexus. This is like your life that we're talking about. And playing small and playing scared and playing prideful, that was never his plan for your life. In fact, he says, don't be afraid of a soul. Don't be afraid of anyone, because I'm right there looking after you. Look, I put the words in your mouth, and I've got a job. You guys, the job isn't always fun. Did you hear what he said? It's a job to pull up, to tear down, to take apart and demolish. We're like deconstructing. We're doing construction work. We're getting dirty. We're getting messy. And it's not always fun. It's just not. It's hard. But then he says, and then you know what we do? We start over building and planting. And if I don't know if that doesn't sound like so much of what we've been talking about, like what we do with the gut, how we teach people about getting rid of all the junk, tearing apart. But it's so much more than that. It's also about what we think and what we feel and what we do and what we don't do because of what gets in the way. So I'm going to have Celeste, can you, well, let me give this intro first. So Celeste and I have been participating in a discipleship group for several months. Like we're talking, this is like a 24-week thing. Yeah. And we're nearing the end. But one of the core principles is something that Celeste is going to talk about. It's the thing that week after week after week we come back to. And in actuality, we have regular homework that we do, and it continues to be looking at this core thing and talking about it with others, being really vulnerable about these things. And we'll talk about the hows and the whys, but I'm going to let Celeste kind of introduce it. So I'm going to put myself on mute, Celeste.
Okay, sounds good. Can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure. Perfect. I have a little bit of a cold, so sorry if I cough throughout this. But okay, so we are going to be talking about the concept of vows. So I'll explain a little bit of what that means, because I think we all know what it means, but in the sense of what we're talking about, what I mean by when I say vow. So essentially a vow is a promise that we made to ourselves at some point in order to be loved. So kind of what happens is we go through an experience, and it typically is a pretty painful experience. I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be, but from that experience, we make a meaning. And then from that meaning that we make a vow of how we have to show up in our day to day in order to be loved. Typically that vow, we all have countless numbers of them, and it's been very overwhelming to uncover a lot of the vows over the last 5 to 6 months. But they very much, each one is us hiding a piece of ourselves, and what they turn into is kind of this automatic way of being. And I'll share one of my vows to kind of give a little explanation and context of what this means a little bit more. But yeah, what it creates is this automatic sense of being that we often don't even know is happening. We just kind of enter into relationships and very quickly fall into who we are based on this vow. It's not actually who we are. It's a false sense of self. And it's allowing the past things that have happened come into our future. And that's why it very much pertains to plexus and kind of the mindset, because if we don't work through these vows, then it affects so much. So I'll give a really brief example of one of my vows. So when I was 7, my mom remarried after divorcing my biological father when I was 1. And I really, not growing up with a dad, I really, really wanted a dad who was proud of me. And I wanted to show him like I can do things and I can be good at things. So I cleaned my room and I thought I did really, really well. And I invited my dad in and said, "Dad, look what I did. I cleaned my room." And I showed it to him, and he stood at the door and he pointed out all of these things that I had missed. And then he just turned around and walked away. And so in that moment, what I experienced was this pretty painful event of wanting my dad to be proud of me. And then what the meaning that I made from that experience was, I didn't do good enough. My dad wasn't proud of me. I should have worked harder. So then I naturally made a vow, which subconsciously we don't often know. Most likely you don't know what your vows are. They just are these guiding principles in your head. But the vow that I made that has affected the vast majority of my life was, I will not let anyone see how incapable I am. So basically vows are, I will, or I will not, or I will never, or just kind of these automatic statements of like, this is what I will do in order to be loved. So for me, it was this deeply ingrained belief that I wasn't capable but then I also had to hide that I wasn't capable. So as I'm sure you can see, that has affected so much of my life, and has affected my plexus work, and has affected, I mean, everything that I've done up to this point as well. So uncovering that vow in the discipleship group that Rachel and I have done together over the last 6 months was super transformational, and has led to a lot of growth, but still there's a lot of growth to be done. And I think it's been, I kind of mentioned this before, it's been so overwhelming to continue to realize all of these vows that you have that are just automatic, like things that you're like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a vow, but it's totally something that I view as true. And I think I have to show up in this way in order to be loved. So yeah, that's the basic concept. So Rachel, what would you like to add? Or
So, I think when a lot of people enter into this idea of uncovering vows, some people might say, like, that's psychobabble, or what in the world does looking at the past have to do with defining my future? I hear that all the time. Like, isn't it just a waste of time to look in the rear view mirror if I want to get forward, right? And that's not our design. You guys, the way that we're designed is the way that our brain and our bodies work together. Is our brain has one primary purpose, and it is survival. Our brain has one primary mechanism, and that is to keep us safe and to keep us secure. And so for most of us, how the brain does that is it holds on to narratives from our past, little bits and pieces that were hard or scary or are limiting, because it wants to hold on to those things for the future, so that if ever they get stirred up or triggered, our little alarm bell goes off in our brain. It's in our little middle part of our brain that says, warning, 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 danger, stay away from that thing. And so what we do then, on what Celeste was saying, on autopilot, without even knowing that we're doing it, is whenever we face anything that trips up a vow, and we'll talk about how do we know when a vow is getting stirred up or tripped up. I would say one way to know is if you move into action or away from action that keeps you small, that is limiting versus expansive. And we can use all sorts of language about that. Like, we could say, well, I'm just an introvert. Well, not necessarily. Not if we are limiting ourselves out of fear or shame or insecurity, right? And again, those are all safety mechanisms. Or we create narratives in our head. Like, this is why I think doing something like Plexus really pushes us into growth if we let it. Because doing your day, let's just think of this. Let's say that you sit down tomorrow and you say, okay, I'm going to do my intentional productive work. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to follow up with, maybe 2 to 5 people that I had a conversation with last week, and I'm going to reach out to 5 new people. So I've got my list, right? And I'm got my phone in my hands. I know I have like 30 minutes to do this, and I sit down, and automatically either my mind starts to wander to other things that, I've got to get done, right? Because, gosh, I mean, those things really have to get done. That's kind of a limiting belief. Like, this isn't that important. Well, why isn't this important? Because I don't really believe that it's going to have any like positive outcome for myself. So, or I'm going to distract myself and get busy with activity because I'm actually scared of the thing, or it's really overwhelming and I shy away from overwhelming tasks. Well, where did you learn to shy away from overwhelming tasks? When did that become your way of being? Like, how long have you noticed that that is your way of approaching stressful things, right? And we just kind of tease these questions back. And generally, our earliest years, meaning usually before we're even like 5 to 10 years old, it might be even earlier than that, we've already had shaping automatic beliefs about ourselves. We've already learned to wear a mask. We've already learned to become agitated, activated, and fight for something, or run away, or numb out, right? Usually, again, in the face of potential pain or stress. Now, the thing about these autopilot ways of being, you guys, is that every single one of them was birthed out of a place where they were probably warranted in the eyes of your little self. Because little kids don't have a lot of power. They don't know how to use their words to get what they want or need. And even if they did, very few adults would take them seriously. They don't know what to do with their emotional expression. They don't have a lot of power to keep them safe or advocate for their needs in the face of people who belittle them or bully them, right? And so little kids, and they're sponges. They're constantly absorbing the messages of the world around them. I remember I was working, well, I wasn't working. This is one of my vows that I had. This is a simple one, okay? I remember being a middle school kid, right, at my church. And my church was filled with elderly people, okay? It was not a hip, up and coming church. It was an old school church. And so I would go, and there would be this group of older ladies, right? And whenever I would come, they would come up to me and they'd be super like kind and sweet. But this one little old lady would say, Rachel, you have such a pretty face. You have such a pretty face. That sounds like a really good thing, right? Like, that's sweet. Except that was in the throes of a time when I was really struggling with weight and body image. And so what I heard, my internalized message from this little old lady I'm not kidding you, every freaking week, like clockwork, is I heard the message of wearing the mask, right, of what people see. That's really the only thing that really matters, right? So you've got to play the game. You've got to have your hair just so. You've got to wear your clothes so. You have to have your makeup perfectly put on in order for you to matter. That has been something that has dogged me my whole life. Feeling invisible and feeling like the only way to matter is on the outside, right? To be accepted on the outside. And that has made me undervalue so much of the gifts that God has given me, my passions, my interests, my things that excite me, my knowledge. Like, I've always thought that those things don't really matter, that they're not enough, right? Now, there are countless, like what Celeste was saying, there are so many of these. And the thing about them is I heard on a podcast today, and I really like this idea of uncovering these narratives, these false selves, these false autopilot, subconscious ways of being to keep us safe and comfortable and secure. Uncovering them and replacing them is not like surgery. It's not like you just go in, you get the little thing taken out, right? And then the surgeon stitches you back up, and then bada boom, you're good to go, and you don't have to worry about that thing anymore. That's not how I have found this work to be. Maybe Celeste is different, but he says that no, this is more like rehab. This is more like rehab. It's a slow and gradual uncovering. And the thing about it is, it's not meant to be the thing that has its power being done on its own. I mean, if you're a stoic person like me, who doesn't like to be vulnerable with other people, that sounds really weird being a counselor. Like, you'd think, like, I just love to be vulnerable and share all my heart good stuff with people. No, I'm really good at giving to other people. I am not good at letting people in my own hot mess hurt. Not good at all. But that is the way for it to be replaced, is one, sharing it with other people who refuse to let you go into ways of hiding, who are like, okay, here's the thing. You're sounding like that might be a vow that's getting stirred up right now. And I'm going to tell you right now, even though you're getting wigged out and you want to, not have this conversation, or you don't want to be here anymore, like, I'm so glad that you showed up. And you having this conversation with me is very meaningful because it frees up some stuff with me. So again, surrounding yourself with other people who are willing to, one, do the work with you, and two, reflect back to you, again, your worth and your value. That's one of the things that has been really pivotal, at least doing this group with Celeste. We have 2 other women in our group. And that's what we do, like, every week to every other week, is we talk about vows that we've uncovered and how they're playing out in our life. And then we call each other out and are encouraging and loving and remind each other of the truth, because those are not truth. Again, those are false ways of being. Those are false selves, not our real, actual Jeremiah 1, from the day before you were born, I knew you and I formed you and I was with you and I had a purpose for your life. I don't think any vow that I have ever made has been backs up or supports that truth. I mean, Celeste, for you, the vows that you make, are they in alignment with that word at all? No. That's how we know that they're lies, because they are not in alignment with what God says and what He sees in His heart for us. The other thing, with these vows is sometimes we ask each other things like, I wonder whose voice that is. So if we say, I feel like this is what's getting tripped up for me, like I keep having this sort of thought process about myself or others or this situation, to be able to actually say, I wonder whose voice that really is. Like, is it a parent's voice? Is it a coach's voice? Is it a teacher's voice? Is it someone who was meaningful or was supposed to show up for you in a certain way or reflect something back to you in a certain way? But maybe they weren't able, or maybe you didn't have all of the information because you were a kiddo, right? And that's how you internalized it. The other thing is these vows, they don't just reside. This is the weird part. They don't just reside in our mind, in our thought process. They actually also reside first in our bodies. So they reside in such a way that, think about when you, maybe think about this. Think about the first time that you can remember feeling true shame. And you don't have to share that with us. Just pull up that image for yourself. One time earlier in life where you truly experienced shame in the depths of who you were. This is where the body gets the message first. So maybe it was a ringing of the ears or a flushing of the face. Heat ran up your face and down your neck. Maybe your stomach felt like a rock. Maybe you felt the urge to run and to hide or to scream or to cry. It shows itself first in your physicality, and it's held there. So later on in life, when that thing, that autopilot way of being gets tripped up, I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine that you have a friend. It's a really good friend of yours. It's somebody that you admire. You've been vulnerable with them before. They know you pretty well. And you've just started doing this plexus thing, and you're pretty passionate about it. And there's this internal gnawing that says, hey, okay, you've got to do the thing. You've got to reach out to your friend and tell them about this opportunity or about the products. I mean, she struggled with gut health forever, right? Or whatever. And so you reach out to this friend, and your friend is like, yeah, I've seen you posting that stuff, and I just don't do that. I just don't believe in that stuff. And then not only that, the next several times you reach out to them, not even about anything to do with plexus, they don't even respond. They're just quiet, nothing. I want you to think, be honest, do an inventory of what that would feel like. Not first, what do you think? What do you feel? Not even emotionally, what do you feel? What do you notice in your body about that when you open up your phone, your notifications, you can see that they've seen it or read it or heard it? Nothing. Nothing. The feelings first, and then the mind starts to get busy. And this is where the mind starts to pull on all those old belief sets, right? It starts to spin a story for you. And it's the same sort of story that's been spun in your life for most of your life. And it's the story that will continue until you begin to first identify it and start to see when it shows up. Oh yeah, there's those there's those vows again. There's those ways of being again. And the thing is we don't replace them just by having a nice thought, right? Like, I wish it were this easy. I know that many of you have heard doing positive affirmations, right? So you wake up and you tell yourself, which I always feel like is a bad Saturday Night Live skit, you know, like, I'm smart, people like me, I'm really, really, really like influential, right? But inside, in my deepest core self, it's not cognitive. It's not a thought process. It's actually a shame process, which is lodged much lower. And the only way that it starts to be challenged is, one, I start to identify it and I name it out loud. That's really important. I name it out loud, even just to myself, but better if you name it to someone else who's loving and kind and who speaks the language. I think this is what's tripping. I'm telling myself this message, right? And then letting other people speak to you, speak truth to you, and then envisioning that that's actually true. Like, begin to start not just saying it to yourself, because it's not just about what you verbalize, it's actually trying it on as if it were true. Like, if somebody, oh, Celeste, can I be real? Like, yep. Celeste and I, we do this where, here's the deal. And I could do this with Joy, and I could do this with Jenna, and I have done this somewhat with Lisa, right? Like, calling out what I actually see. And so, like, when I see Celeste as passionate. I see her as compassionate. I see her as a survivor from a lot of really, really hard things. I see her as someone who has spent years of her life pouring into other people and giving up herself and her heart and her time, right? Over and over and over. So, I mean, I see Celeste as a discipler. I see Celeste as having a future that is abundantly successful. Even if she, didn't do Plexus, when she talks, it matters. Celeste has an amazing way of writing truth, taking beautiful pictures, and conveying her heart in a way that is so real, right? So I see all these things in Celeste. Every single day, I see these things in Celeste. But that's not Celeste's autopilot. Is that your autopilot way of being? No, right? And so, like, as her friend, it's not even my job. It's because I love her to call out what's true in her. And I know it's true because that's God's design for her life. And it just comes out of her, and I have said similar things. I think Lisa will be okay with me saying this, because months ago, Lisa wouldn't ever post a selfie. She would never even do an audio verbal voice message. I remember the first time that she did it, she was freaking out and apologizing for her words over and over, and it was just to me, right? And I was like, Lisa, you have a story that matters. Like, you are a daughter of God, and one thing that shines through is your heart. And she disqualified herself 1,000,000 times over for not being good enough. And none of it is true. Because what? Jeremiah verse Go ahead, Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5 through 12. She's been chosen. Before she was ever born, she was claimed, right? She was given a purpose. And it wasn't a little purpose. It was to tear down and then to rebuild and to prophesy and to say things to people that sometimes they're not ready to hear, and that's okay. That's okay, because she also has this loving gentleness about her. It's okay. And God says what? Don't be afraid of a soul, because I am with you and I am providing the words. I am with you. I am with you. And I love at the very end, right? Jeremiah, God says, Jeremiah, what do you see? And Jeremiah says, I only see a stick. And God praises him. Yes, good seeing, right? Because what you see with your eye, I am going to complete in you. I'm going to complete it. Celeste knows, like, that's been such the powerful thing that God has been showing me. And I'm going to put a link to a podcast, you guys, today that was so reinforcing of all of this that we've been talking about on this call. But the one thing that, I just love this, and I'm going to end here. I just love this. So the speaker, he gave this picture. He said, here's the deal. When most artists created their paintings of the crucifixion, they actually, they actually created them, they created it incorrectly. Because usually when you look at an artist's rendition of Christ on the cross, they, there's no easy way to say this, they usually put undergarments on Christ hanging on the cross. He's usually wearing like a loincloth. But the thing is that's not how people were crucified. You see, they were hung at eye level, not super high. They were hung at eye level, only feet away from busy streets, so that people could see them, yell at them, belittle them, spit on them, demean them. And they hung at eye level on their cross, dying naked. Naked. Not one bit covered. And so what he said is that when Christ died on the cross, he did not only die for your sin, which is the greatest news ever. When Christ hung there at eye level, naked, on the cross, fully visible and despised and rejected, he put your shame to death with him. Not just your sin, knowing everything you've ever done and will ever do, all your not enough, all your too much, all your I don't have words, or I don't look good enough, I don't fit the mold of what I should to sell supplements, whatever. And he said, I've given you everything you need. And all the rest, all the shame, it's dead with me. And I just think, wow, what do I really have to fear here? What do I really have to fear here? And that's why every day when you show up, here's what happens. You sit down to do your work and you acknowledge that it feels like getting gutted sometimes because a non-response hurts so bad. Worse than a no. Because it plays with your head garbage. because their non-response has you make up a storyline in your head, and it's the same sort of autopilot storyline garbage, right? Or they're telling you I'm not interested, or that's not really my thing. Plays on all the autopilot ways of rejection, all the ways you've ever been rejected in the past. Does it hurt? Yeah, but I promise you, when you show up to that hurt and you say that that doesn't define me, and I'm gonna keep showing up, and it doesn't define me, and it doesn't define me, and it doesn't define me, because I've got people to change lives. I've got a calling, and my life is supposed to matter. It's not just supposed to be safe or secure or small. It's supposed to matter. And it does. And it does. So what we're going to do, and I will lay this out further, but I have a proposal. Like, if there are some of you who are wanting to do this brave work, this transformative work of calling out some of your autopilot stuff. Remember what I said, it's not meant to be done alone. In fact, that's not how God works. He works best and most when you're in community with other people. And so I know this could be really scary, but I'm telling you, this is just about moving your life to the next level. Not just your plexus business. This is your life to the next level. We would be willing to do 2 individual coaching sessions. Individual, so you don't have to be with a big group of people doing this. It would be Celeste and I, because she's a great partner, to be able to do this and help some of your unknowns to be brought into the known, or at least begin the rehab process. I'm not promising that, everything will be made known right away, but you will get at least in the practice of thinking differently, feeling differently. And I would say anyone, like, I'm hoping that more than just 1 or 2 of you do this, because it's free. You don't have to pay for it. But what we would also do is set up a private group chat or Marco Polo. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. Marco Polo is like Messenger, only it's with video, so you can see each other, which there's great value, because then you can actually see eyeballs, right? And call stuff out, and support and encourage and love each other. But that would be like showing up and saying, hey, all right, so I'm at my computer right now, and I'm hearing this head trash. Like, this is what I'm telling myself, right? And having people be like, oh, me too. Yes. Okay. All right. So what are we gonna grab onto? What's something that we're gonna move the needle in the opposite direction right now? That hold us accountable, or say something like call truth into it. And then we could do follow up with a larger group Zoom. So I will lay this out like in probably our private group chat, or on our private group wall. And if you want to do it, if you want to participate in it, again, it's only 2. You're not signing up for however many months that we've been doing this, just a couple, just to get your feet wet. Then you can either send me a private message, or you can just say, hey, yeah, I want to do that thing. Okay. And we'll go from there. So let's stop for today. Let's do a check-in. You can individually just check in with yourself to see how are you doing with that intention that you started with at the beginning. right? How'd you do? Did you see something that spoke in the direction of that intention? Hopefully you did, right? And we will continue this on. Next week we'll show up for another Monday night meetup. I've got to toss around some ideas with Celeste and we'll go from there. Thanks, you guys, and have a wonderful evening. Signing out. Bye, guys.